Welcome to Distilled, the Bourbon Podcast. I'm Brent. You know my co-host, Aaron, Chuck, and Brian. Guys, welcome back to a slightly chilly turret today.
Not as cold as I thought it would be in here because it's about, 9 degrees outside right now?
Yeah, something like that. Cold. Single digits for sure. We've been doing this show for quite a while. We started in the summer of 2021. As we record this podcast, it is January of 2025. The world has changed a bit. We've seen things come and go. We've made it through pandemics. There's seems to be a little unrest in the world, but this is a bourbon show. And what we want to talk about today is what's going on in the bourbon society. Let's give a state of the union, state of the Rick House, if you will. What's happening in the whiskey business, Brian?
Well, for one, I think one of the most interesting articles that came out was, Stoli Vodka has decided that Kentucky Eagle is filing bankruptcy.
Kentucky Owl.
What did I say?
Eagle.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We haven't even had this is on zero alcohol.
Yeah, zero alcohol. Kentucky Owl declared bankruptcy, which made major news because they had plans to invest a couple $100 million into a facility. And all those plans have now been scrapped. So that's one of the things in the forefront of the news in bourbon industry right now.
Let me tell you, I think Kentucky Owl, we've talked about it, it's overpriced.
It's good.
It is good.
I like the juice. I keep a couple of bottles. What's the brown, the confiscated or?
That's their cheapest version.
Yeah, it's one that I keep, and then I love this ode to an Irish whiskey that's actually a bourbon. I think it's pretty good. I'll miss them, but strange how we've gone from there. No one can do any wrong in the bourbon world, and now we have a bankruptcy.
Yeah,
Yeah. I was gifted a bottle of Kentucky Owl that I just never got around to open, and I was at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival in Bardstown 2 years ago, and Kentucky Owl was there, and I tried some, and I thought, holy cow, why have I left that bottle unopened? Now, I don't know that I'm going to spend $230 to buy it.
I was about to say there's 230 reasons why you haven't done
But there's
it.
only about this much left in my bottle. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. They find good stuff. It's all sourced. But anyway, two big things have happened in the industry. In late October, MGP Ingredients, which operates the gigantic former Seagram distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, outside of Cincinnati, huge producer of sourced whiskey for craft distillers and non-distilling producers and startup companies and so forth like that. Late October, they announced that they are going to reduce whiskey production. They reported a sales drop of 24% in the third quarter of 2024 compared with 1 year earlier. And if you only look at the distilled side, it's a 34% drop.
Wow.
So I don't know that they've ever stated how much they're going to reduce production, but they cut production. Then just about a week or so ago, Brown-Forman in Louisville, another huge producer, Jack Daniels, Woodford Reserve, a bunch of other labels, they announced that they're going to lay off 12% of their workforce because of falling demand, and they are going to close their cooperage, which makes barrels, in Louisville, and apparently sell off the assets of that. So MGP, big producer, Brown-Forman, big company, announced they're cutting back production. Lot of reasons speculated or stated why this is, but this has led publications ranging from the Wall Street Journal to the Lexington Herald Leader to ask questions, is the bourbon boom over?
Great question. I think we're going to try to answer that today. It kind of begs the question, is this a supply problem, or is it inflation and raw ingredients and labor getting too expensive? Or is it a demand problem where we're just not interested in bourbon as much anymore? Do we have any insights into that?
I think it has to do with both, actually. I reached out to a lot of people preparing for this episode, and one of the things that I heard were both of those. We have an oversaturated market because during COVID, people had some excess money. We were getting checks and different things like that, and
more time on our hands.
And more time on our hands. We weren't going on vacations. Everything was locked up, so we were spending money more on bourbon. Well, now with inflation and the economy where it's at, that money is no longer available, and so people have stopped buying. And I talked to a consumer today, and he basically said, I was buying 3 to 4 bottles a week. Now I'm buying 1 bottle a month.
Yeah.
So that will absolutely, and if you multiply that exponentially over the market, that's absolutely going to cause more bottles to be on the shelf. Another thing, younger people are not drinking bourbon as much. So when the bourbon boom or bubble, whatever you want to call it, when it started, it was a younger crowd that caused that escalation in the bourbon market. And now younger people are actually not drinking alcohol at all. That's the trend. Non-alcoholic cocktails, cannabis cocktails, things like that. And with the more of the cannabis market being legalized, then it's causing a big hurt on the whiskey industry or bourbon industry for that matter. And so one article or one thing I heard today was that one whiskey producer was selling 100 barrels a week for sourcing and different things like that. And this past week they sold 1.
Wow.
So there's the demand side. Here's a perspective on the supply side. I remember, 5 years ago, several years ago, the Kentucky Distillers Association, which represents most of the industry in Kentucky, was pretty amazed that there was as many barrels of bourbon aging in warehouses in Kentucky as there are men, women, and children in Kentucky. So that's about 4 million. Right now, there's about 13 million barrels aging in Kentucky warehouses. And in the Wall Street Journal article that appeared recently, or 1 week ago today, to be exact, Ken Lewis, the owner of New Riff Distilling up in Newport, speculated that the Kentucky bourbon industry is producing 3 times more product right now than they are selling.
Wow.
Which
so
he has an interesting perspective, because prior to getting into the New Riff business, he owned Party Source, right close by there, a huge, massive liquor store. So he knows the trends. He's been in the liquor business a long time. But I think this is a softening of the spirits market across the board. This Market Watch magazine that I get every month, it talks about the sales declines of Jack Daniel's, Smirnoff vodka. So it's not just bourbon. It's just, as Aaron alluded to earlier, with the younger generation, they're not drinking. Some have contributed that to seeing their parents overindulge during COVID. I mean, there's a number of reasons why they're not drinking, but that's one reason. Another is there's a lot of NA drinks, cocktails and stuff out there on the market now, where you can have a nice drink and not have to have the alcohol with it. So a lot of the younger consumers are moving towards that. And it is January. A lot of people go dry this time of year as well.
I don't think this is just
New Year's resolutions,
New
I
Year's
guess.
resolutions, yeah.
Was that what you're seeing at the store? Are you seeing a slowdown at your stores?
Oh, definitely. We posted. We got some allocations in. We posted on Facebook. Some guys in the local Tri-State Bourbon Finders posted it on their page, and the next day I came in, and to my astonishment, there's still allocations sitting there on the counter.
Wow.
Whereas before it'd been mad frenzy to get in there. Fear of missing out. I think that's gone now. I don't think that's
So allocations are going to lessen, maybe, or at least you're going to have access to them for now. But as distilleries pull back their supply, do you think they're going to try to keep those allocation levels the same, or are they going to try to sell as many bottles of Blanton's as they possibly can?
Well, I mean, if you look at, I follow the what's going on at Buffalo Trace or whatever that group's called, where it shows the bottles available at Buffalo Trace every single day. And
the Facebook page.
Yeah. And so used to, they would have lines. I mean, hundreds of people waiting in line to buy and they didn't release it until 8 o'clock in the morning, but today's Blanton's Day, and they would have Blanton's available, and all these people would be waiting for Blanton's. And then the next day was Eagle Rare, and then E.H. Taylor, so forth and so on.
Weller.
And you could only buy one bottle for 90 days.
Yeah.
Of that brand.
Of that brand.
Right.
So
from that gift shop.
That's it. So now you could go to that gift shop, and they'll have Blanton's, Eagle Rare, E.H. Taylor, all of them out at the same time. And there's no 90-day.
They've done away with the 90-day.
Because they are trying they want to get rid of the product that they have. And I think some of that goes,
from what I hear, there's still people there going.
There still are. But
so there's
it's even
still
today.
lines. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I was there Friday. There's a huge line. I got there, I believe, like 9:30. They had opened at 9. I met Vince there, who's the president of the Owensboro Bourbon Society, who hadn't been to Buffalo Trace in about 10 years. Wow. And he said, "What's going on? Are they releasing George T. Stagg today?" I was like, "No, we just got Blanton's and Willer." So for somebody who hadn't been on the Bourbon Trail in a while, it was a surprise to him. But to many, it's a lot less people as opposed to in July or peak season for bourbon hunters.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to make about the Buffalo Trace allocated gift shop situation because. We had an ice storm in Kentucky that was followed by a snowstorm. We've had a lot of, it's not 70 degrees like in the springtime where people are lined up to the parking lot. It's been cold. It's been in double digits. It's heading into single digits tonight. You said that they were actually closed one day because of ice conditions. So that might have been a temporary blip. I don't know for sure. But there was a time a week ago where people at the What Does Buffalo Trace Have Today Facebook page were saying no line, walk right in. Could be weather related. I'm not sure that that's an indicator. But if MGP is cutting production, if Brown-Forman is cutting workforce, 12% of their workforce, about 650 people worldwide, and closing their cooperage, there was a time where the talk in the industry was, are there going to be enough barrels? And now Brown-Forman says, we don't need a cooperage anymore. That's worrying. I think what our viewers and our listeners are going to wonder is, what is this going to mean for them? Are they going to be able to find more allocated product out there? What's going to happen to prices, Brian?
I mean, prices, supply and demand, obviously, there's more supply, so I see prices going down. I can't see them going up. Woodford, at the end of last year, they actually announced a price decrease. Woodford's owned by Brown-Forman. So they announced a $2 or $3 price increase on their 750 milliliters, which is a direction that I haven't seen any distillery going in a long time. Most of the time it's price increases. So it'll be interesting to see what the major distillers do, and even what the craft distillers do, who have to mark their bottles up more, to make them profitable. They don't have the scale and the means and resources as some of these large distilleries. So I even think there's going to be some decrease in the craft business as well.
They've been popping up like crazy.
Right.
You know how much all of us love Casey Jones. There's MB Roland that's close by here that we love. A lot of craft distillers out there that have really innovated so much. We talk about this all the time. They have done so much innovation. They really pushed the market forward. Is that going to get pulled back now? Can you afford to take a chance? And can you afford to have a small distillery?
I think the ones like Casey Jones and MB Roland, they don't have anything to worry about, in my mind, because both of them have done a great job of staying local, using local ingredients, using local farmers, everything, and building a great following of people local. I mean, you can include us in that if you want to. The ones that I think are going to hurt the most are the ones who got into this to sell it off really quick, because now your bigger brands, your Brown-Formans, your Buffalo, they're not looking to acquire small distilleries anymore.
I got you.
So if you got into it to make whiskey and to build relationships with farmers and the town and put all your money there, I think you're going to be just fine. But if you're getting into it or got into it to get bought out, looking for that quick, I think maybe you are in trouble.
Yeah.
A couple of questions. Buffalo Trace has just been working on, maybe they've completed a $1 billion expansion.
$1.2 billion expansion.
In Frankfurt. Is that has that production begun yet? Is the expansion complete?
Not complete.
Okay. So that's basically a doubling of their production, and they were big before. And I guess Limestone Branch near Lebanon, Kentucky, I guess that qualifies as a craft distillery. They got bought. But I love Limestone Branch. It's a cool place to visit. I like Yellowstone bourbon. The last time we went there, a year ago, we drove up on this sleepy little road where Limestone Branch is located, and right next door, right across the property line, there is this enormous construction project. And my first thought was, are they building a nuclear power plant here or what?
Huge.
It's not a nuclear power plant. It's a new distillery for Jefferson's. Jefferson's, which I think it always bought from other people.
Yeah.
Jefferson's is building that. I think it's $500,000. Maybe it's more than that. Do this. Go on to Google Maps and do a search for Limestone Branch, Lebanon, Kentucky, and then enlarge it and look what's being built right next door. Limestone Branch is a little bitty place, but what's being built next door is enormous. Yeah. So
scary.
That's going to be a lot of product coming online.
Yeah.
Can Jefferson's make it?
So here's something else we haven't talked about is if you've got good juice, I think you're going to be okay. This is a cycle, right?
Right.
Casey Jones, I think they make great stuff. Western Kentucky Distillery, Jacob Call is going to be okay. All right. Yeah. Anything he makes and touches is going to be okay. Green River, they've priced themselves in a really good. They're in a great place in this market, I think.
Yep. They're cheaper than Woodford.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah. I think Four Roses is probably in a pretty good position. Although we haven't really talked. Has anybody heard of any production slowdowns for Four Roses?
They built a gift shop a few years ago, but I've not heard of any production increase.
Yeah. So, they seem to be right-sized, I think, for their brand. Okay, I don't know anybody at Jefferson, and we've never had them on this show, so I don't feel bad saying this. I don't really like to drink it.
Right.
Okay? I'm going to spend my money somewhere else. I'm going to get a Casey Jones or I'd rather buy a Taylor's when I can get it. Thank you, Brian. Than drink a Jefferson's or an Ocean or anything like that. So, man.
I think the consumer now is also wanting to try it before they buy it. There was a time during COVID where, just let me get this bottle without trying it, and bourbon bars have scaled back what they're putting on the shelves. There's got to be specific things that they know can move, which in turn limits what liquor stores will sell, because if you don't have a sample there for somebody to try, a lot of times the consumer right now, they're just not buying it.
No, they're not.
They said, I don't want their bottle unless I know I'll like it.
Yeah.
Have you seen a decrease in the number of people attending tastings?
Not tastings.
Not really.
Not even our raffles. Our raffles are still doing pretty well.
I think the allocated market is still there. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
I think what's hurting the allocated market, though, and you can comment if you want or you don't have to, is liquor stores that are getting their allocations and then pricing them out of that just astronomical.
Yeah.
And driving the secondary market because what's happening is those bottles are just sitting on shelves. We're not moving that product. So what that's killing the market.
Mm-hmm.
But Brian doesn't.
See, I would have thought it would be the other way around. I thought that liquor stores are going to get more allocations now, and that will hurt the secondary market because they won't be able to demand the price because I can go to Brian's and buy it at regular MSRP and not pay the premium.
So I think that's going to happen with Blanton's and Eagle Rare. I think that's happening now. But with like the super allocated stuff like Pappy Van Winkle, some of these other ones, I don't think that Buffalo Trace is great at marketing, so I don't think they're going to make it readily available for every liquor store.
Sure.
I think the E.H. Shutter Small Batch and some of the less sought-after allocations will be a mainstay at stores in the near term.
You think you'll be able to just walk in and find, kind of like Sazerac Rye now.
Right.
Used to, you couldn't find Sazerac Rye.
Or even Buffalo Trace.
And now you walk in just about any liquor store and it's sitting right there on the shelf.
Well, I've got a question. Mm-hmm. What's in my glass? Because I've been sitting here staring at it.
We're getting awfully excited here.
We're leaning toward to talking about bourbon and not drinking it. So,
in recognition of MGP's announcement about cutting production, something else happened recently, which is, I'm not sure exactly how recently, but Bulleit released a 10-year-old rye. Bulleit they make their own bourbon, but they have long bought their rye from MGP. And now there's a 10-year-old 95% rye, MGP rye in a Bulleit bottle. How long have you had it, Brian?
Oh, it's been...
Has it been a while?
I'd say a year.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, I read a very glowing review about this 10-year-old rye, oldest rye I've ever tried. So I thought, in recognition of the MGP announcement, we ought to try this 10-year-old Bulleit made by MGP and just see what we think. Yeah. And the reviewer, I'm very susceptible to this kind of thing, but the reviewer talked about the nose being of spearmint.
Straight.
It's amazing.
Straight up spearmint.
Like gum.
Yeah.
And I love that on a rye. I love minty, and there's on the opposite end of a rye, there's deal qualities on some ryes. People are turning their nose up to that. I love that quality about a rye.
What do you think about this one, Brian? You're a rye guy.
It's exceptional. I mean, for the price, I think it's what, $50 for a 10-year-old
52.
rye. Yeah, I mean,
You're not going to find many 10-year-old ryes or
bourbons for that matter.
ryes for
Or any
$52.
whiskey, yeah.
Man, that's delicious.
So the one thing I did want to note about the craft distilleries, the Kentucky ABC in July of last year changed the law to where certain distilleries of smaller size, of course, can self-distribute. I think that's going to be a game changer because they eliminate the middleman. We did a barrel pick with the Owensboro Bourbon Society through Casey Jones. They brought it up and delivered to us. So that's, 30-35% of margin that they get to put in their pocket as
That's
opposed
awesome.
to a distributor. So that's going to help the craft distillers here in Kentucky. I'm sure there's other laws in other states that prohibits that.
So does that mean they don't have to go through a distributor to stock their own gift shop?
Correct.
And
that was changed several years ago.
Okay.
But now they have it to where they can sell it directly to me, and they don't have to go through a distributor.
Oh, I see.
The 3-tier system for smaller distillers allows them to do that. Kind of like the brewers, craft brewers as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
they can sell directly to you as Beverage Barn.
Correct.
That's
A liquor store.
Yep.
Gotcha.
All right. So as I'm not the rye drinker that you guys are, to me this is fine. This is good. This is a $60 bottle rye. It doesn't taste old to me. It doesn't taste like a 10-year to me. But I admit that I'm not the connoisseur like you guys are. So in our last episode, we tried the Hemingway rye from Western Kentucky, and it just knocked my socks off.
right.
I want to say I'm going to drink that before this one.
Okay.
Sure.
It's different though,
Right. It's finished in Jamaican rum barrels.
right? Yeah, I'm on.
Yeah, man. That's another thing too. You think about with the market, whiskey producers are trying to go after that younger crowd, and
Sure.
so they're making you talk about flavored whiskeys, cherry, honey. Everything's going to honey.
Yeah.
Just watched a episode of Moonshine.
Drink bourbon, Rabbi, honey. You won't be sorry.
Good stuff.
The even moonshine, Climax moonshine with I can see the guy, but I can't.
Tim Smith.
Tim Smith. His product's not moving, so he had to figure out what he was going to do, and it ends up he aged some of his moonshine in honey barrels.
Yeah.
It's just the market that it's going to is finishing and different things like that. And I know this is a bourbon podcast, but you want to know the next boom, you better watch your tequila. Tequila's coming,
Really?
100%.
We're going clear again, Chuck. We've lived through the cycle, my friend.
They are. Yeah.
More for us, right?
It's really the premium market tequila that's really excelling right now. Kind of like it did when bourbon first took off. It was the Peerless that got released, 7 or 8 years ago now for $100.
Right.
There's a bunch of tequilas getting released, for those premium price tags, and people are paying for it. It doesn't have any sign of slowing down right now.
Really, tequila was the first spirit that I observed very casually as being a real premium price. And I'm talking 15 or 20 years ago, there was $150, $250, $400 tequila out there.
Yeah.
I wasn't drinking it, but I knew that it existed, and I was not aware of any bourbon at that time, 15 or 20 years ago, that was, just a retail price of.
That also leads us into the next issue with tequila. Of course, it has to be made in Mexico.
Yeah.
It's about to go up by 35%.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
going to be a huge blemish to the spirits industry as a whole.
Well, this is unquestionably something that the bourbon industry is looking at. In the Wall Street Journal article, our friend Eric Gregory, president of the Kentucky Distillers Association, said that the possibility of the U.S. applying tariffs and other countries putting tariffs on our product, in other words, Kentucky bourbon or U.S. bourbon, was the thing that everybody was most concerned about. if the price of bourbon in Europe suddenly goes up 25% because the EU returns a tariff that the current president might put on, it's going to make it very hard to export bourbon and rye and whiskey from the U.S.
Yeah, no doubt. So there's going to be financial impacts for everyone, whether you drink bourbon or not. If you live in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, you're going to feel it.
Yep.
Number one, there's going to be a pullback in employment to some degree. There's going to be a pullback in the amount of taxes, whether that's sales tax or corporate taxes or anything else.
Bourbon's very heavily taxed.
It's very heavily taxed. So was accounted for about 30% of the cost of a bottle?
Sounds like a number I've heard before.
Yeah. So there's going to be an impact one way or another.
So two of the people that I heard, just knee-jerk reactions to the news stories that have come out are two people who were not really bourbon drinkers. I mean, they've had it before, but they're not out there buying allocated product. They might have a bottle of Woodford or a bottle of Makers on their shelf, but they don't have. They're not buying very much. They've been very skeptical of the bourbon boom. They've been very skeptical of all the craft distilleries and the expansions and so forth. And they were the first people to reach out to me to say, "Oh, well, looky here. Did you see this?" So I guess those are people that are not going to be won over by bourbon. If anything, they've been very skeptical and resistant to join the bandwagon. One of whom is a listener of this podcast, ironically.
Okay.
So, Ron in Lexington, if you hear me,
we know where you are.
They've been expecting this for a long time.
And this reminds me, I got in the liquor business at the tail end of the craft beer boom, and then the mass bankruptcy of the craft beer boom.
Yeah.
And one thing I think that distillers are looking at is these craft breweries who went into every state, and it's super tough to do. It's hard to even dominate one state as opposed to going into all 50 states. So I think a lot of the distilleries are being very methodical about what states they go into, who they have as their sales rep in those states, because you can have a large distributor. They're not going to sell your product. You have to have somebody boots on the ground that's doing tastings at the stores. Otherwise, it's just another bottle of bourbon on the shelf.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the craft guys are, pumping their brakes on expanding outside of, their core area. I know Casey Jones has told me several times that they don't rely on distribution as a way of, it's great extra money, but they don't rely on that to pay their bills. Their main business is getting people into the distillery.
Yep.
Selling
Saying it's not going to
there.
break them if they don't get to Idaho?
Yeah, if they don't get to Idaho, it's I don't think it's going to break the bank for them, so I think they'll be okay.
That was something else I heard today from a couple of distillers. They basically said, those distilleries that have experiences, I'm thinking of somebody like a Hard Truth, like a Casey Jones,
Sure.
Who do a really good job with their client engagement.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be fine because they get to Hard Truth, or they get to Casey Jones, or they get to MB Rollin and meet Mudcat at MB Rollin, and Karen at Green River. When you think about those people, or when you think about the brand, those are the people that pop up, in your mind,
right.
And you are you're more likely to support a brand based on that relationship.
Yeah.
So hence why Brian's, you got to have the right person selling your product, and if you've got the right person selling your product, then you really don't have a whole lot to worry about, because it's not like the bourbon industry is going away. It's not like all of them are declaring bankrupt. Person said today it's just kind of like a little bit of air is being let out of the balloon. Do we think that there will be a Band-Aid that fixes that? Nobody knows. Only time will tell, really.
History has shown us that there's always been an alternative market that bourbon and whiskey specifically has turned to, whether it was Japan or medicinal or Canada. There's always been an
India,
yeah. Mm-hmm. There's always been a market out there for Kentucky or American-made whiskey that has kept it afloat long enough for the cycle to come back around and for it to be popular here in the U.S. again.
Yeah, but there's also been a whole lot of distilleries that went out of business.
Absolutely.
James E. Pepper in Lexington, it went out of business about the time I was 3 years old, like 1960. I didn't know until 5 years ago that there had ever even been a James E. Maybe longer ago than that. Didn't even know there had been a James E. Pepper.
Yeah.
The old Crow Distillery, the old E.H. Taylor Distillery, the Stag Distillery where Buffalo Trace is right now. I think that was idle at a time. Green River was down. A lot of distilleries.
Sure.
Both of the major distilleries in our hometown of Henderson shut down. Both being reborn in various ways. But medicinal or Japan didn't save a lot of those. Japan might have saved Four Roses. In fact, until 20 years ago, all the Four Roses made went to Japan. It's, it could get real.
Yeah, but with the tariffs, I mean, we're talking about a different ballgame this time around. That could potentially price them out of that Scotch, whereas Japanese are drinking Scotch. If bourbon is, Scotch would be probably, edit that out. I don't know where I was going with that.
Okay, something I've wondered about. There have been not just so many brands, but so many iterations or expressions of individual brands with finishes. You started with Angel's Envy, finishing bourbon in port barrels and finishing their rye in rum barrels, and finishing is going on all over the place, all kinds of different kinds of barrels. You've had these small releases, not just single barrel, but a very small release from a distillery. I texted Aaron earlier today. I've gotten a little bit of weariness from so many different releases of niche products and finished products. So my thought was those are going to start going away, but I think you're hearing something different from the industry.
They seem to think that you're going to see more of the finished stuff, trying to play into that flavor profile of the younger generation and what they're trying to go after.
Don't you think there are a lot of people intimidated by bourbon?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. I spoke with a young lady today who just tried it and found out she liked it, but I think she was intimidated about it, and she's very intrigued. She was asking questions across the lunch table about, what do you mean by a 10-year-old rye? And, what is your favorite bourbon? And
You said they're like kids. I don't have a favorite. Well, they're Black Label, maybe. I don't know. You may not feel that way anymore. You did when we first started this.
By the way, you said something very quickly a little while ago that was worth hanging on to. You're talking about honey bourbon. Not my thing at all. But Bourbon Rabbi's honey bourbon.
Yeah.
I was kind of bracing myself saying, this is going to be just cloyingly sweet. It's not sweet. It's sweet. That's a nice product.
It is so subtle.
Yeah.
And nice.
It's kind of a cocktail in a bottle.
It is.
It's kind of like an old fashioned.
Yeah.
Chaim does stuff really well.
He does.
He does.
He does. Well, I don't know where we're going. I find it interesting. Our road in the last year, we've seen blends, we've seen cast strength, full strength, we've seen finished products. We've seen all kind of new distilleries that have popped up. We've seen some that have sold out and people have moved around, and I don't know where we're going next, but man, what a fascinating topic. It's not a commodity where this equals this equals this. They're unique across the board, and I find it amazing that you can pick up a bottle of Four Roses Yellow Label and it tastes like every other Four Roses Yellow Label you've ever tried in the last 25 years.
Sure.
That you can be that consistent, and then you can pick up some amazing single barrels like those Silk Velvets we tried, those 4 different barrels.
Very unique. And
they were all unique, and they were all fantastic.
Right.
So, I don't know, fellas. Last words, where are we going?
I think if the American or the consumer, if you're a bourbon consumer, the thing that you can do to ensure that this doesn't completely implode is to just support your local distilleries. Support the little guys for that matter.
Your local liquor store.
Local liquor stores. Just support the American or the Kentucky bourbon industry as a whole, or American bourbon industry for that matter. We've talked about on here several times. There are lots of good whiskeys outside of Kentucky, but we just do it better.
Yep.
So I'd like to leave with this. One thing we haven't talked about is the super premium market. Buffalo Trace, everything they touch turns to gold, right? They released a Weller Millennium, MSRP of $7,500 on the market. So when it was released, I was thinking that they released 700-800 bottles. They released like 7,000 bottles. So a lot of those bottles are being sold on auction sites now for less, $4,500.
Wow.
Less than what I even paid for them, for those bottles. So I think that was a good test for Buffalo Trace to see that, that is not a market that you should
They
be toying with
found the
right
top,
now.
right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, Chuck, do you have anything you want to add?
No, end it for us.
So really, here's my advice. Drink what you like. The market will decide. Drink what you like. The market will decide. And we'll continue to come back and try new bourbons here on the Distilled Bourbon Podcast. And we appreciate all of our viewers, all of our listeners. If you can give us a thumbs up or share this on Facebook, we appreciate it and appreciate you. And with that said, please drink responsibly.